I can at least show you some of the things here. And since it's my event that I help create and I manage the site for the most part, I don't mind showing you all this information. When you're looking at some of this stuff, you can understand how we get into the basics within the event itself. Now, I will mention that everything here has kind of its point and purpose in terms of what's being shown here. Now, if you were looking at this page normally, you wouldn't see the people reached or the engagements that are conducted here. You would just see that a couple people liked the post in this particular case. So, what we see here, 161 likes, so that's good. The big thing that we're understanding here is that we're seeing the information for what it is. Now, typically when you're going into this information, most people get the misconception about what it means to have data attached to your particular brand. And what we see here is a lot of likes and loves. It used to be just likes. And I know it was mentioned by a couple of people about forming the point of identity attached to whatever it is that you're stating on social media. So if you like a post, you're generally giving your approval towards something. Now, pressing a like button, is really just as easy as pressing the like button. No, I just like my post, so I better not do that. But there also carries weight in terms of your loves, ha-has, wows, sads, and angers. And I know, okay, I will sit here and be the first to say the fact that we quantify some of these seems kind of stupid. But the point of it is that we have a kind of a variance and breadth of how these reactions come into play. So this is actually more in a more advanced system than what we normally have. So the simple fact of the matter is when we scroll, hover over something, and then go into any one of these, it actually takes just that much more time. And it means something for statistics because it's easier to just click here than to hover and press the love. It's so much more convenient. And again, I know this is going to sound kind of dumb. However, the biggest thing is you get to understand a little bit about not only audience participation, so you can have like a survey where people click an emoticon based on what you're trying to share. I've seen this happen a lot where you scroll along these. Now, what they'll always find is if you have like in the mix, like will always get picked the most. And the reason like will get picked the most is because it's easiest. But again, now we're getting into a stronger sense of identity when it comes to posting versus the interesting dynamic of what we think is funny versus making fun of something. Same with wow, a little bit with sad and angry. Okay, this is how many people have always thought about this when it comes to the analytics is you have your counts of likes, comments, and shares. And to a degree, that actually makes a lot of sense. And the reason I say that is because we have something called EdgeRanks, which talks about not only the amount of exposure that's been given, but the amount of clicks something has, as well as the amount of valence and engagement that comes about. And we can judge this based on this particular algorithm, which again is called an EdgeRank. You can look that up. However, what we notice is once we go inside the particular facets within the page, now we can get a little bit more advanced. So you see up here what I'm highlighting for those who don't work a lot in Facebook, so I'm just kind of running a brief tutorial here. You'll see a couple of things that we can utilize. Now I'm not going to click on inbox because that'll show people specifically. So the main place I like to go is my Insight page. So let's click on the Insight page. And again, this is a very small business that we're running. It's not even really a business. We're just kind of a student-run organization here. You can see a little bit on how our page is engaged. And so much of this looks into page views, which is the actual page. Don't get confused with hits versus page views. So when a lot of people talk about hits, they think it's how many people viewed my page, and that's not the case. Hits is a very misleading statistic. If you have a lot of images, GIFs, anything within your page, that is considered part of that algorithm within a hit. Whereas a page view is just the page itself. If I click on a link, it brings me to the page. That's what happens. The other thing to think about is what's called reach. And I like looking at reach quite a lot. Move here. And I'll show you a little bit here. First, before I'm showing you a little bit of the graphic here, but reach, in this case, is down here, is the count of a person with at least one impression. Now, when we get into the difference between impressions, and I'm going to show you this a little bit later when I get into the ad manager, which again is on your HubSpot article. So if you read carefully enough, I think it's like halfway down. So the reach is the total number of people who see your content, whereas impressions are the number of times content is displayed, no matter whether it's clicked or not. Think of a reach as a number of unique people who see the content. However, an impression is a means the content was delivered to somebody's feed. So with an impression, I don't have to actually see it. This is where we get into a gentleman by the name of James Potter, and for those who read Harry Potter, no, I'm not referring to the father. This actually talks about how we are exposed to media and how much we pay attention. So sometimes it's automatic, as in we don't pay much attention to it. Sometimes it's transported, that we're so immersed that nothing in the world could break us from whatever we're concentrating on. But again, this is where that reach comes in of, again, the total number of people who've seen your content. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because now I can start to look at when I post something, you'll see these two separate lines, your 3D lines here. One is called organic and one is called paid. Now, if you can really just think about it for a brief second, you'll probably understand what the difference of it is. Paid means I actually paid for the post. So this is what you would call a boosted post. And I'll show that here in a second in terms of how that works. But boosting a post basically means I'm going to pay an amount of money that basically will draw an audience into it. Now, you can do this with a couple of different variations, and it's kind of cool actually in terms of the promotion. And I'm going to see if, I'm going to keep off that because I think some of my information is attached to it. But what we're starting to see here in terms of organic versus paid here is you'll probably notice that most of it will always be that paid will get a lot more reach than organic. So if you're promoting something, that happens. And so you set the budget with it. So this is the kind of cool thing with advertising on social media, whereas a lot of companies will say that you have a contract, you have to work with us for an extended period of time, whether it be a quarter, whether it be a year, whether it be several years. Whereas Facebook, you can do this kind of off and on, which makes it really interesting and fun for working through your advertisements. You can also look in terms of posts, and you can see obviously within the engagements that within the reach, 1.9, I guess at 1900, it would obviously be that was the one that was most promoted out of the rest of these. So, and this is the other thing about working with this kind of information is I can geotag some of this stuff in terms of where I am, in terms of where my audience is. So for this particular set, we actually have people from around the state, namely Boone, Banner Elk, Blowing Rock, West Jefferson, Lenoir, Hickory, Charlotte. I think I even included Raleigh in there for people who want to pay attention to this. So we can actually see how people are interacting towards any time. So this might be helpful in terms of when are my viewers online. And so I can see here around 8 o'clock at night is probably the best time that I should be posting. Whereas obviously 4 in the morning, okay? As we can probably imagine, there aren't a lot of people at 4 in the morning paying attention to this information. But you can even see for like things like 7, 6, 8, not a lot of impressions, whereas around 8 o'clock, that's the best time to do it within the course of my audience, which is kind of cool in terms of what we're doing here. Another thing we can do is look at actions on page. I don't know if we have a lot of information. No, not this time. Let me see what else I've got here. Promotions. This will show you in terms of how much you use in terms of your promotion. And it'll tell how much you spend. Now, Facebook actually does a per-click system that anytime someone clicks on it, you spend XYZ amount of money towards it. So, in this case, we're not putting a whole lot of money into any one given post. And sometimes we don't spend a lot of money for it. So you can see sometimes not all the money is spent for what's being used, because it's either towards a time that you set for it or the amount of money that you use. So there's a lot of different things, and I encourage you, if you have one of these things, to play around with this and determine what we have here. You can also track whether or not you might be burning somebody out by likes or unlikes. So cool, we got 50 organic likes in this period of time on March 11th, but we also got 2 unlikes, so, well, you can't win them all. And you will not be unanimous in anything you do. I hope that's realized, but that is something to consider here. So, yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff in terms of your particular page, in terms of what can be found. So if you are creating something for your business, these are some of the analytics that you can look into. Now, one thing that I like within promotions that I think really doesn't get a lot of credit is this right here, page responsiveness. And in this case, we have a pretty good response rate. We have 100% response rate at 8 hours and 51 minutes. I think we could do a little bit better in terms of the time. But this actually quantifies in terms of if you tend to send a message towards somebody, this is a very good thing to have in your back pocket, to be able to say, we've got a very good response rate. Ergo, my customers feel comfortable sending me a message. So recently, my wife and I went on a trip to Switzerland for a conference in Lugano, Switzerland. So that's South Switzerland, right on the border of Italy. And we wanted to go to a brewery. And we noticed that they had a Facebook page. Now, in this particular place, we don't speak Italian, because that's what they speak in Lugano. But luckily, most people speak English around there. So I actually messaged the page for a brewery that I was interested in and said, hey, are you guys open? Now, they weren't. However, they sent us a really nice message. In fact, they gave us a couple recommendations for places that we should go if we liked good craft beer, which was really cool that people took that time. But again, the only reason I felt comfortable and not thought this was a dead page was because the responsive time was fast. And otherwise, I probably wouldn't have done anything to reach out. They were closed for that particular period of time, which made it even more impressive that they would actually message me back. Now, within, again, your HubSpot article, we go beyond a little bit of what we do with this kind of information here. We can go into what's called Ad Manager. The Ad Manager, excuse me one second. Sorry, really dehydrated. Ad Manager is actually kind of a cool system for the use of what you're trying to look at within your paid advertisements. So this goes even more into depth about who your audience is. Now, for the most part, when I looked at my audience here, let me see. Maybe it's people. For the most part, when I look at, oh, goodness gracious. For the people who view this was actually, we're seeing a very young audience for the most part. So a lot of you would be saying, okay, that makes sense, because if you're primarily advertising in Boone, the majority of the people that are living there are 18 to 24, college students. So that makes sense, and it also makes sense of the type of people that showed up to the event. Most were college students. And again, this is a nonprofit with the Watauga Humane Society at Appalachian Mountain Brewery, where there's live music and dogs. So, I mean, if you can think of something more Boone, I'd like to hear it. Dogs and beer. That's a pretty winning combination around here. For the ad manager, though, we can actually go a little bit more into depth, and we can go into viewing charts. So not only do we see, again, the results rate, the post engagement, we have our people reached, the amount used here, but we can also, again, look at our demographics. And in this case, this is where it got really interesting, because we had always mentioned, a couple of people were mentioning in class that, hey, look, there's not a lot of people in the older age demographic that are even viewing this stuff. And our data would actually suggest quite the opposite in terms of who's viewing this. And partly is because more an older demographic are using Facebook now. And I think there's a Hootsuite data page on the first week that helps explain that. So this is kind of cool in terms of when this is used. Now we can also look in terms of Facebook. Now we don't look into Audience Network, Instagram, or Messenger, although you can use those things in terms of what's being promoted here. Oops, go on. I'm trying to think. Let me go back. Here's another one. There was one in impressions. I'm not sure what it was. Yeah, see, this was last year in terms of the people that were viewing it. And you can actually set the date. I'm actually going to go back to that first one. So that was for last year. But this one, let's go a little bit more in terms of the days used. So I think I sent this ad 2 weeks ago. Again, this looks into the engagements as well as the people reached. So again, this is a really nice tool to be able to have to check your advertisements, see who's viewing them, what time are they looking for them, and something that you should always be trying to put in your particular campaign as well to look into advertising these. So again, all of these are very important tools to be able to be using, to be able to be collecting about who's viewing what at what particular time, and how to utilize these given any kind of information. And we might also figure out things like, where are people viewing this kind of information? So are they looking on their phones or their computers, whatever it may be, which makes a big difference in terms of how we're doing this for a focus group right now, where we have our information that's very mobile friendly, because we know most of our audience are going to be on their phones, not their computers, when this is being presented. So I'm going to stop around here. However, if you have any questions about this kind of information, please feel free to reach out. I enjoy talking about this. I really like data analytics when it comes to promoting this information and really getting a good grasp of what we're talking about when we talk about social media advertising. So anyway, like I said, if you have any questions, let me know. As I stated before, starting Wednesday, I will be in Boston. So I might not be very readily available. However, just message me. I'll try to get to any of y'all's posts. I will be extremely busy, but I will try to get to y'all's posts however you plan to do that. And one last thing, I couldn't help but notice this. That's not anything bad. Do make sure that we're running with the weeks in terms of posting relevant information. We're still getting some stuff about social media influencers, which is fine. However, I still want us to really focus a little bit more on Facebook specifically with regards to strategic communication. So make sure you're paying attention to that, and we'll kind of go along with that as we go. So thank you all for your time, and I will probably talk with y'all on video sometime next week. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.